Hello friends, welcome to Star Explainer. Tales of Herding Gods Part 319 and 320 explains based on novel. So let's start explanation. Outside the black coffin, everyone waited for a moment and they saw no movement from the two red-colored lights inside the coffin. In the distance, the other people that had entered the ghost ship together were also taking note of the situation over here. They were waiting for the result of Ancestral Dragon King's investigation. They knew very well about how dangerous this ship was, thus they were also glad to let others risk their lives while they reaped the benefits. The silence in the surroundings was stifling. Ancestral Dragon King threw a glance and that half-god understood. He mustered his magic power, and he first applied a defensive divine art around his body first. The divine art transformed into a tortoise shield and the markings of black tortoise also appeared on his arms. Only then did he brace himself to go forward and stretched his hands carefully inside the coffin to feel about. The coffin was very huge and his hand was still quite a distance away from those red lanterns. Gradually, this half-god walked into the black coffin and vanished. No more activity came from inside, and after a moment, the voice of that half-god came from the inside of the coffin. They are really lanterns. Everyone outside let out sighs of relief, and Ancestral Dragon King also relaxed slightly. They saw that half-god walking out from the coffin with a smile. The things emitting the red light in this coffin are really lanterns. They are two paper lanterns. I could only find one, so I took it out. There's nothing dangerous inside. Why are you guys looking at me like this? That half-god carried a lantern and looked peculiarly in the surroundings. Everyone secretly moved back, as though they had seen a ghost when they looked at him. Ancestral Dragon King also took a step back and tightened his grip on his dragon head scepter. Even he had never seen such a strange sight before, so he couldn't help becoming nervous. Luo Wushuang and the rest far away were also silent. Those disciples of Spirit Elite Guards were slightly frightened when they saw the situation over here. Sword God, what is happening? Dragon Rearing Sovereign hid behind Village Chief and asked with a trembling voice. Village Chief and High Heavens were old foes. Dragon Rearing Sovereign had also almost died time and again in Village Chief's hands. Even though there was enmity between them, Dragon Rearing Sovereign still respected Village Chief the most, therefore when he was in such a situation, he still subconsciously moved close to Village Chief when in such a situation. As for Qin Mu, who was his lord, Dragon Rearing Sovereign hated him down to his bones. Qin Mu frowned as his gaze landed on the half-god, who had walked out of the black coffin. This half-god was holding a paper lantern in his hands, and the red light in the black coffin earlier was from this paper lantern. However, when it was in the darkness, it couldn't help make people thought that they were two red eyes. The paper lantern was very weird and it would spin when the wind blew. There was a face on the lantern which was staring with its eyes wide open, looking at its surroundings with a smirk. However, this wasn't what had scared everyone. What had truly scared everyone was that half-god. On the neck of this half-god was another paper lantern. His head had vanished without a trace. His face appeared on this paper lantern, and there was still nose and eyes. He continued to speak and asked, "What is wrong? Why are you guys looking at me with that kind of gaze?" His face appeared on the surface of the lantern, while light still continued to shine from the inside of the lantern. It was as if someone had sliced his face off and pasted it on the lantern. The light was dim and his face was also flickering between light and dark. Ancestral Dragon King suddenly raised his dragon head scepter and tapped on the void. The lantern on the half-god's neck suddenly extinguished. Pa-thud. The lantern dropped down onto the ground. There was nothing left on the half-god's neck and divine blood suddenly spurted out furiously. His body swayed and he collapsed onto the ground without any breath remaining. You will all die. The paper lantern that was in his hands dropped on the ground and rolled 2 rounds on the ground. The face on that lantern revealed a strange smile. He, you will all die here and receive eternal life, connected to this ship forever. Ancestral Dragon King stepped on the lantern and extinguished the light in the lantern. With a solemn face, he said, dressing up as God and playing the devil. I'm a great god on numinous sky realm, you truly not know death, by trying your tricks in front of me. He roared and the dragon head scepter, in his hand smashed ruthlessly into the black coffin in front of him. That huge black coffin instantly shattered into pieces, and gave off thumping sounds as they fell to the ground. His battle power was astonishing and even the black coffin, with the seals of the 4 deities, couldn't withstand a blow from him. The dust dispersed and miserable screams came from the pieces of the coffin on the ground. Fresh red blood started to pour out from the wood of the coffin. Everyone was astonished and they hurriedly rose into the sky. They didn't dare to land on the ground. Seeing the fresh blood coming out from those pieces of wood, they could actually see living human embedded on the planks, as though they had been fused together with the coffin. Some of them revealed their faces and looked like relief sculptures. Some revealed half of their chests, while numerous arms also grew out from the coffin. These hands tried to grab here and there as though they were struggling to grab something. Some of these faces were warped as though they were finding it hard to breathe. Countless miserable screams rang out. Save me! Ancestral Dragon King was at a loss. Suddenly a face cried out. Ancestral Dragon King, it's me. It's me. I'm God Yufang. You had sent me here to investigate this ghost and now I'm trapped here. Dragon King, please rescue me. Ancestral Dragon King was astonished and he hurriedly looked at the half-god who was fused with the coffin. It was indeed one of the gods he had dispatched to investigate this ghost ship. He had already dispatched 5 to 6 groups of strong half-gods to investigate this ship. There was no lack of existences on Jade Pool Realm, and God Execution Stage Realm, yet like clay oxen entering the sea, none of them had come back. Never would he expect one of them to appear in the black coffin, and was actually fused with the black coffin. Suddenly, another voice cried out. I'm General Pan Cheong from Celestial Heaven's west gate of the military camp, quickly save me. I'm East Deity's disciple Qin. I've been trapped here for God knows how many thousands of years. If you can save me, East Deity will reward you handsomely. I'm Light Emperor Crown Prince Kai Xiao. Who is coming to save me? Light Emperor will definitely reward you handsomely. All kinds of cries came out and everyone on this ship was at a loss. They saw that the faces of the wood quickly shriveled up and their voices became softer and softer. When the fresh blood finally finished pouring out, they had all turned into dried corpses that had died with a remaining grievance. More and more fresh blood flowed out, and they slowly covered the other seals on the deck. Qin Mu said with a low voice, Village Chief, look. Village Chief narrowed his eyes and replied softly, those seals on the deck are absorbing this blood. We can't remain on the deck any longer, we have to leave as soon as possible. The deck of this ghost ship was covered with circular seals and the blood was currently being absorbed by the markings on these seals. The seals gave off faint green light. The runes that formed the seal gradually became darker as the runes swirled. Black-colored coffins slowly grew out from the bottom of the deck. Qin Mu and the rest had predicted the situation ahead of the rest and had already rushed towards the building on the battleship. The other people also reacted over and rushed there. Behind them, huge black coffins grew out from the deck. They increased in number and were like a forest of black coffins. Banging sounds rang out as the lids collapsed to the ground behind them. Those were the sounds of coffin lids landing on the ground. Qin Mu turned back to look, but he saw nothing jumping out after the coffins had opened. There was only black gas coming out, and they scattered around like pythons with no bodies. There were half-gods that ran slow and got into contact with the black gas. They gave off miserable screams as their bodies melted and broke down quickly. However, their faces remained and only their melted bodies had fused into one with the coffin, transforming them into faces on the coffins. Village chief also saw this situation and couldn't help shuddering. He saw the black gas scattering quickly and filling up the entire deck. In front of them were also black coffins that were standing upright. The coffin opened up and black gas spread out. The coffins in front formed a forest and the black gas were like venomous pythons that had scattered in all directions. They couldn't guard against the gas. Some half-gods roared loudly and their primordial spirits stood above Jade Pool. They executed their paths, skills and divine arts that had terrifying power, but when they got invaded by the black gas in the next instant, their corporeal bodies quickly melted. Village chief felt another chill down his spine and shouted, "Mua, go slightly faster." Qin Mu seemed to be in deep thoughts as he talked to himself. This kind of black gas seems like a kind of creation divine art. It is creation divine art, however, this creation divine art seemed to have linked those with life and those without life together. In such a situation, you still have the mood to think about these. Village chief was furious and grabbed him by the collar, dragging him along. His mind moved and beams of sword light paved the path for him as they cut down the vital chi. Although the black gas was sliced in sections, they couldn't be eradicated. Village chief could only grab Qin Mu to dodge left and right while grumbling bitterly to himself. Dragon-rearing sovereign hurriedly followed after them, and he saw Qin Mu looking like a kitten that was being grabbed by the nape of his neck. He didn't move as he got lifted up, but he still turned to the back and observed those scattering black gas, muttering something under his breath. "My lord is a Tao maniac." Dragon-rearing sovereign executed his divine arts to block the black gas, but he couldn't block them down no matter what. He cursed at him in his mind. A Tao maniac who doesn't know death. Qin Mu's gaze sparkled and he continued to mutter to himself. If it's creation divine art, in that case, what is this creation divine art used for? Why would it be out of control? Why would so many black coffins appear? What is the time travel incident of feathered forest guards about? What is the reasoning behind this kind of creation divine art? Black gas spread out in front, and all of the black coffins opened up. The black gas shrouded the entire building on the ship so others couldn't see where the building was. Darkness surrounded them and beads of cold sweat rolled down village chief's forehead. He stopped in his footsteps and leaned his back against dragon-rearing sovereign to guard against the surroundings. Right at this moment, a bright moon lit up in the darkness, and Luo Wushuang executed a treasure. That treasure gave off the aura of a deity of that light actually forced by the black gas. Luo Wushuang brought the remaining few disciples of spirit elite guards to rush at the moonlight. There's a treasure forged by a great deity on divine knife Luo. Qin Mu exclaimed in admiration. No wonder he is so calm and composed. Luo Wushuang, I'm here, do you still remember who had chopped off your arm? Luo Wushuang ignored him and brought his disciples to continue forward, leaving this place. And at the same moment, the stone coffin on Feng Chuyan's back opened up and the awe of the emperor overflowed into the surroundings. In the coffin, the god emperor of the half-god sat upright and forced back the black gas. Sister Chuyan. Qin Mu shouted, do you still remember me? Feng Chuyan's voice came from afar. Of course I do. You have betrayed Mother Earth and Mother Earth can't wait to take your life. Qin Mu's face turned black. Crimson light, son of God's body also transformed into a beam of red light and sped through the darkness. He ignored Qin Mu. Son of God also has no code of brotherhood. Qin Mu shook his head, and everyone on the ship took out their means of protection. Even those visitors from the celestial heavens that had slid down the rope also had all kinds of treasures to protect them. Qin Mu took out the commander's seal, and the moment the commander's seal was out, the black gas suddenly froze in place. Next, wisps of the black gas quickly flew back into the coffins, and he heard continuous bangs as the coffin lids automatically covered themselves back on the ground. The black coffins gradually sank back into the deck of the ship and vanished without a trace. Village chief blinked his eyes and looked at Qin Mu. He asked in a low voice, "Is this jade pendant of yours really a treasure to control this ship?" Qin Mu shook his head and answered honestly, "I don't really know as well, I had guessed it." "You?" Village chief was helpless and he said, "Let us continue forward." Suddenly, a lantern floated down from the mast and came to Qin Mu. That lantern was circular, and it swirled a few rounds around the three of them. Village chief was alarmed and he examined this lantern with narrowed eyes and hand on his sword. He was ready to burst forth with an attack anytime. Creak! Sound of doors opening came from the lantern and village chief was astonished. He actually saw two doors on the lantern, and a bird-headed mutant that was only an inch tall pushed open the door from the inside. He gave a few looks at them. The light coming from the back of the tiny human was intense and extremely dazzling. When the three of them looked inside the lantern, they saw that it was actually a blazing sun that was behind the back of the 1-inch tall human. "Feathered Forest Guards, General Lin Xiao, pays my respects to Commander." That tiny human paid his respects in front of the door, and he looked very convincing. "Commander has become younger again." Qin Mu blinked his eyes and said vaguely, "En. Lead the way." "As you command." That tiny human sat on the door sill and the wings behind him flapped. The lantern lighted up the front and flew forward. Village chief was puzzled and his consciousness rippled to ask Qin Mu. "Mua, what is going on?" "I have no idea." Qin Mu was at a loss. Maybe he had recognized me wrongly. In front of them, buildings were in sight, and in front of a building was a huge dragon's head, which was actually still alive. Its body had fused with the ship, and his blood and flesh were connected to the wood. The face of the dragon was distorted, and he seemed to be crazy. He was in a lot of pain, and he began to cry out. Heaven and earth changes, the unchanging constant of 36 people. What is the meaning of this? Tell me, what is the meaning? This is another ancient god that has been merged with this ship by the creation divine art. However, he seemed to have gone crazy. Dragon rearing sovereign thought to himself. The abilities of this divine dragon seems to be much powerful than me. I'm not crazy. That crazy divine dragon suddenly lowered his head to look at them and chuckled. You guys will become like me sooner or later. You will fuse with this ship and become part of this ship. The unchanging constant. The unchanging constant. You can only leave if you solve the unchanging constant. There are records left by someone here. Voices rang out in the building. Qin Mu and the rest hurried over, and they saw quite a number of people already gathered in the building. Crimson Light Son of God, Feng Chuyan, the visitors from the celestial heavens, and the rest were all here and looking at the wall. Qin Mu also looked at the writings on the wall and he was stunned. Big Senior Brother's handwriting. On the wall were writings left behind by founding master Wei Suifeng, and they weren't about the ghost ship. It was describing something else. Qin Mu read in detail and he was startled. Celestial Empress of Dragon Han Celestial Heavens had died. Why has Big Senior Brother written about this incident on this wall? What has this incident to do with Feathered Forest Guard's time travel? The writings on the wall mentioned that Celestial Empress had gone down to the lower bound to visit her ancestral land, yet she didn't return after a long time. Celestial Emperor had ordered the left Feathered Forest Guards to head to the ruins of End to fetch Celestial Empress back to the celestial heavens. After some days, the left Feathered Forest Guards sent a memorial to Celestial Emperor saying Dragon Count Country near Guishu was rebelling. The power of Dragon Count Country was strong, and they had taken over the ruins of End, trapping Celestial Empress. They had requested His Majesty send reinforcements forward to quell the rebellion. And so Celestial Emperor ordered the right feathered forest guards forward to quell the rebellion. However, just when the right feathered forest guards had left, the left feathered forest guards sent another memorial to Celestial Emperor saying that Celestial Empress was assaulted and had suffered rather heavy injuries. Celestial Emperor added a decree to let the right feathered forest guards investigate how Celestial Empress was assaulted. As the right commander of the feathered forest guards, he led the right feathered forest guards and hurried to the ruins of End to work with the left feathered forest guards. They defeated Dragon Count Country and seized King Dragon Count. Dragon Count Country surrendered. Celestial Empress' injuries had also mostly recovered, and she planned to nurse her injuries before returning back to the celestial heavens. However, something happened that night. The undercurrent in the abyss of the ruins of End burst forth, and turned the sky as dark as night. No moon or stars could be seen. Peculiarities came out of the abyss together, and the hearts of the gods were in fear. They couldn't sleep the entire night. When the undercurrent stopped, it was already daybreak, and the soldiers found Celestial Empress' corpse on Square Jar Mountain. In the side palace, all of the maids were killed, and even the left commander of the feathered forest guards had died outside the palace. Wei Suifeng seized the 8th dragon king of Dragon Count Country, and ordered him to guard the coffin of Celestial Empress. He then ordered soldiers to investigate what had happened that night and to find out the cause of Celestial Empress' death. There was a soldier who said he had seen 2 Celestial Empresses at night, and there was also a soldier who said the abyss of the ruins of End had spewed out devil gods to assassinate Celestial Empress. Wei Suifeng's investigation found no success. He immediately transferred the coffin of Celestial Empress onto the ship and escorted King Dragon Count back to the celestial heavens. They sailed in the reverse direction of the celestial river's flow and reached Yuanju after several months. The celestial river floated above Yuanju, and there was suddenly heavy fog on the river. Reports from an official said a woman was casting a spell in the center of the river. The writings on the wall ended here, and there was only a confusing sentence was left behind. I've come from the ruins of End and returned to the past when I met this woman. I visited the wonders of the past and searched for the riddles of history. I think I should extinguish the lantern and return. Dragon Count Country. Ancestral Dragon King suddenly cried out. Legends say that Dragon Count Country was one of the earliest appearances of the dragon race. It was a country formed by divine dragons born from heaven and earth. Rumors say that it was a country of giant dragons formed by heavenly dragons born from the dragon veins of the ancient celestial heavens. The dragons there were 10,000 yards tall and possessed boundless divine power. King Dragon Count was even the first divine dragon in this world. I originally thought these were only rumors. I didn't expect Dragon Count Country to truly exist. Could that old dragon from earlier, who was merged together with the building, be King Dragon Count? Asked a half-god who was beside him. Ancestral Dragon King was stunned, and he shook his head. It shouldn't be. Rumors say that King Dragon Count was one of the strongest existences. How could he merge with this ship? It's definitely not him. Suddenly, a youth close by put his hands behind his back and said leisurely, Dragon Count was seized and suppressed on the ship. Later, this ship vanished from the celestial river, so that crazy old dragon might really be Dragon Count. Ancestral Dragon King's long dragon's beard floated, and he asked unpleasantly, "And you are?" That youth said with a slight smile, "I'm from the celestial heavens." Ancestral Dragon King frowned and sneered. The celestial heavens. The Crimson Light era has a celestial heavens. The High Emperor era also has 2 to 3 with celestial emperors changing one after another. Which celestial heavens are you from? That youth chuckled and said, Ancestral Dragon King, Your ancestor refers to himself as Dragon Count to show that he is an ancient god on the same level as Earth Count, Heaven Duke, and Mother Earth. Yet, never did he expect to still be seized by the feathered forest guards of the celestial heavens. How embarrassing. In that case, why are you still trying to hold him in high regard? Ancestral Dragon King's expression dimmed, and his murderous aura burst forth. That youth didn't mind him. Two gods behind him suddenly walked forward and protected him in the middle. The youth waved his hands and said, "Demon dragon of the lower bound." He doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, so it can be forgiven, there's no need to bother about him. What makes me interested is that in this incident recorded by the right commander, there were two celestial empresses when Celestial Empress was assaulted. He revealed a playful smile and said, "However, Celestial Empress always existed in the celestial heavens, and there's no news of her death. What is the reason? On this ship, is the Celestial Empress corpse in the coffin really Celestial Empress? Could there be other secrets? The Celestial Empress in the celestial heavens." The two gods beside him had worried expression, and they lowered their voices. "Your Highness, there are many ears here, you can't talk about the existence in the palace." That youth said with a smile, "The incident regarding the real and fake Celestial Empress is important. If Celestial Empress died here, it would be truly strange if she's still in the celestial heavens. Since the coffin of Celestial Empress is on this ship, let us just find it and find out for ourselves." He didn't continue talking. He must also have been afraid of people being nosy. "The Emperor's family is so dirty," Feng Chuyan sneered and said in a low voice. That youth looked at her and said leisurely, "Maid of Mother Earth, Feng Chuyan. Which family of Mother Earth do you think is clean?" Feng Chuyan sneered and didn't reply to him. Crimson Light Son of God said with a smile, "This prince is from the extraterritorial celestial heavens. May I know how to address you?" Crimson Light Son of God who hides in the floating world and doesn't dare to show himself. That youth smiled and said, "I've heard that Crimson Light Son of God has borne the luck and fate of the entire Crimson Light era, yet why are you still so mediocre and incompetent?" Crimson Light Son of God wore purple, and his expression didn't change when he heard that. He just replied with a smile, "There's no Crimson Light Son of God in this world. I merely adopted the title to give a little hope to my clansmen, so that they don't sink into despair." That youth suddenly felt respect and said, "For Son of God to tell me the truth, your breadth of mind is truly wide, and you deserve the title of Crimson Light Son of God. I am Prince Qin Mu of the Celestial Heavens, nice to meet you, Crimson Light Son of God." Crimson Light Son of God returned the greeting. Village Chief frowned. He looked at the people in the building and had a bad feeling in his heart. There were too many big shots, and the three of them could be considered to be the ones with the least sense of presence. They were also the three weakest ones. Everyone looked to be getting along well now, but if a fight was really to break out, the three of them would probably be the first to die. Even if First Ancestor came, it wouldn't really change anything, he cried out bitterly to himself. Qin Mu looked at the writings on the wall and said with a smile, "Village Chief, there are many interesting incidents here." "Yep." Village Chief replied with a black face, "Don't talk. It's easy for you to become the center of attention if you talk." Qin Mu acknowledged, and his mind started becoming active. Wei Suifeng is teacher Woodcutter's big disciple, founding master of the Heavenly Saint cult, and also the big senior brother of Imperial Preceptor, and myself. From the writings he left behind, he must have gone to explore the ruins of End and ended up encountering Celestial Venerable Ling. By some unexplainable reason, he returned to the past and somehow became the right commander of the Feathered Forest Guards. He must have known many secrets about how Celestial Empress was assaulted. However, on his way back to the celestial heavens, he met Celestial Venerable Ling again. As for returning after extinguishing the lantern, Qin Mu pondered and looked at the lanterns floating beside him. He thought to himself, Big Senior Brother could possibly have time traveled to the Dragon Han era during the day, and he would return after night falls. However, he didn't want to return, so he forged the sun into lanterns to hang around him. This is so he would always be situated in the day. Later, he met Celestial Venerable Ling and felt it was time for him to return, so he extinguished the lantern and returned. However, it's also lucky that he's gone. He didn't manage to become a member in the time travel incident. What kind of place is the ruins of End? He suddenly recalled those maps that Founding Master had given him. One of the geographical maps was the map of an abyss in the ocean. Could that map be the ruins of End? Cult Master Qin. Crimson Light Son of God greeted and smiled at Qin Mu. Qin Mu even returned the greeting and said, Crimson Light Son of God, when we met the danger on the deck earlier, you sure ran fast enough. Crimson Light Son of God said with a smile, I know of Cult Master's methods, that's why I didn't assist. Cult Master created chaos in the floating world back then and almost demolished my floating world. So how would you be troubled by this small danger in front of you? Qin Mu broke into a smile. It's still Son of God that's good with words. High Emperor Overlord Body Qin. Luo Wushuang's voice rang out. Long time no see. Qin Mu looked towards the voice, and he said with a smile, Divine Knife Luo, you ran faster than anyone else, just now and didn't bother about taking your revenge on me. I was still hoping you would come to save me, but you only cared about saving yourself. Luo Wushuang smiled and said, Overlord Body Qin of the High Emperor era, I wonder if your sword is still as sharp as before. Qin Mu laughed and said, my sword skills are even better now, they are number 1 in the world. Zhehuali, have you told your master how my sword skills are? Village Chief gave a cough. Qin Mu pretended not to hear. Village Chief snorted and thought to himself, I haven't taught him a lesson these past few days, and this brat has gotten more and more conceited. Usually, he only claims his number 2 humbly, and now he is claiming to be number 1 in sword skills. Zhehuali said solemnly, Teacher Luo, Qin Mu's sword skills are indeed unmatched in the world, he's no weaker than me. Prince Qiuming looked at Qin Mu and said curiously, so you're that overlord body that revived goddess of heavenly yin. I've also heard about you. Coming down to the lower bound this time, one of my missions is to get rid of you, and also to get rid of Jiang Bai Gui and Emperor Yang Feng. Bringing the heads of you 3 back to the celestial heavens, I would have completed my task. Qin Mu said seriously, I'll pay my respects at your grave the next year. Prince Qiuming said with a smile, the celestial heavens pays no mind to the people of eternal peace. Eternal peace is too weak, so it's hardly even in the celestial heavens' line of sight. The only ones worth taking a look at are the remaining survivors of Founding Emperor, the remaining survivors of Crimson Light, and also the remaining survivors of the fake dynasties in Dragon Han. Therefore, only I was sent to deal with eternal peace. Cult Master Qin is an interesting person, I like interesting people. I've been asking around about you, and I'm rather impressed with your intelligence and wisdom. Qin Mu laughed and said to Village Chief, this prince isn't a good-for-nothing. Village Chief had an unpleasant face. Stop talking. The more you talk, the better chances the first ones to die will be us. Ancestral Dragon King, Celestial Empress coffin is found, said a half-god as he hurried over. Ancestral Dragon King's eyes lit up, and he immediately led the other half-gods over. Prince Qiuming, Crimson Light Son of God, and the rest also followed after them. Feng Qiuyan also carried the Emperor's coffin on her back to go forward. Village Chief immediately said, let's leave this ship and not participate in this. Qin Mu was about to speak, when Village Chief had already grabbed his hand and led him out of the building. Dragon-rearing Sovereign followed them out, and the 3 of them looked out of the ship to see the ship being shrouded by black gas. The outside world couldn't be seen. Village chief said solemnly, "Take that jade pendant of yours and break through the black gas. Let's leave immediately." Qin Mu took out the commander's seal, and that tiny bird-headed human in the lantern suddenly said, "You can't leave. Once on this ship, nobody can leave. Even if you jump off the ship, you will return back onto the ship." Village chief frowned and took off his shirt. He tossed it out. His shirt submerged into the darkness and vanished. Next, village chief saw another shirt appearing on his body. It was that shirt which he had thrown earlier. Village chief let out a shaky breath. Let us go and see that celestial empress." The 3 humans and 1 lantern walked back to the building of the ancient battleship, and suddenly, a light twinkled. It wasn't known where that light had come from, but the entire ship was bathed in intense light, which caused Qin Mu, village chief, and the rest to be unable to see anything. The light appeared quickly and disappeared quickly. When the light vanished, Qin Mu examined the surroundings, and he was slightly stunned. This ship was originally sailing under the celestial river, but now it was sailing on the surface. Fog was around them, and gradually, there was bright and beautiful sunlight shining down. The ship had sailed out of the fog. The bright sun hung high up in the sky. Qin Mu looked outside. He saw the ship floating on the river surface, and the celestial river was currently floating in the sky. "Lin Xiao, what happened?" Qin Mu asked the 1-inch man in the lantern. In that lantern, the wings behind the tiny bird-headed human flapped, and he said, "Commander, there's no need to panic, this is merely a reset of space and time." "Reset of space and time?" Village chief asked carefully, "What is the meaning of that?" The 1-inch human in the lantern said, "The divine art in the fog is incoherent. This kind of peculiar divine art would burst forth, after a certain period of time, and bring us to a fixed year. I calculated it before, and this ship would be brought to 36 different years. The current year should be." The lantern shone outwards and revealed billowing smokes, as well as fires of war. "It's the Light Emperor era now, as for which year it is, I'm not clear." The tiny human in the lantern said, "The son of Light Emperor from the Light Emperor Celestial Heavens, Emperor Sun Kai Xiao, is about to board this ship." Just as his voice landed, a young general that was currently fighting flew over. He raised his hand from far away, and a mirror in his hands shone down on this ship. That young general arrived along with that light, and he looked awe-inspiring with his 3 heads and 6 arms. "Emperor Sun Kai Xiao." Qin Mu shuddered and said softly, "Wasn't Emperor Sun Kai Xiao one of the faces from the black coffin, which ancestral dragon king shattered, when we first boarded the ship?" That face claimed to be Crown Prince Kai Xiao of Light Emperor. Village chief's face changed slightly, and he muttered, "It can't be him, he was clearly swallowed up by the coffin, and died from loss of blood. The one that just boarded can't be Crown Prince Kai Xiao, it must be a person with a similar name. This is the Celestial River Ghost Ship." The voice of that young general rang out in delight and surprise. This treasure would actually appear at this moment. Could the heavens be helping me? I've heard that this ship carries the strongest gods of the ancient celestial heavens. If they can be used by me. He waved his flag, and numerous 3-headed and 6-armed gods flew over to land on the ship. That young general cried out, "Search this ship. Find out where the feathered forest guards of the ancient times are. Your Highness, there are seals on this ship. Open them." After a moment, black coffins grew out from the deck, and black gas spread out. Waves of flustered cries came from the gods of the young general. When the black gas finally dispersed, numerous gods of the Crimson Light era, and that young general had vanished. Only the black coffins remained on the deck. The black coffins slowly sank down and vanished. When they reappear once again, Crown Prince Kai Xiao will die because of the black coffin being shattered. The 1-inch human flapped his wings in the lantern and said, "Commander, let us go see Celestial Emperor's coffin. Follow me." Qin Mu and village chief looked each other in the eyes, and both of them were slightly muddled. Village chief suddenly said, "General Lin Xiao, when you met Qin Mu for the first time, you said Commander has become younger again. What is the meaning of that? Have you seen him in the past? Was his age much older than he is now?" Qin Mu felt a chill down his spine, and he hurriedly looked at the tiny human in the lantern. The tiny human in the lantern remained silent. The wrinkles on village chief's face distorted, and his voice was slightly trembling. "Which also means this isn't the first time we have boarded this ship. We have already boarded this ship many times, and even stayed for a very long time on this ship. Am I right?" The tiny human sat on the door sill of the lantern and flapped his wings. The lantern floated forward, and he said, "On this ship, every time is the first time. Over here please." Dragon Rearing Sovereign collapsed onto the ground and wailed, "We are done for, it's over. My lord, we are finished." Qin Mu's expression was grim. He grabbed his dragon horn and dragged him forward. They walked around a pavilion and saw that the old dragon, that had fused with the building in front of the pavilion, had already turned into stone. On the face of the stone dragon was a look of terror. Qin Mu raised his head and examined this stone dragon. He said with a smile, "Could this crazy old dragon be Dragon Rearing Sovereign?" Dragon Rearing Sovereign shuddered, and his body became even limper. "Mua, don't scare him." Village chief had a solemn expression, and he said seriously, "I've encountered more than my fair share of strange occurrences, and have been through countless trials. I won't be trapped by this ship. Don't worry, I can definitely bring you guys out, let's go." Behind the building was a hall, and the lantern brought them through the long winding corridor of the palaces. They passed by fake mountains and discussion halls and came to another hall behind the hall. The first thing that entered their line of sight was 8 huge and red dragons. The bodies of these huge dragons hung on a horizontal beam above this wide hall, and their bodies were half stretched down from above. Their bodies then coiled around bronze pillars, as they stretched their claws forward to touch the ground. Their necks were raised high, but their heads were lowered forward at a floating coffin. 8 huge dragons were precisely in all 8 directions of this coffin, and seemed to be protecting this coffin. However, the bodies of these 8 dragons had already been turned into stone. It was as if they were being carved from sparkling and translucent rubies, which looked extremely gorgeous. Ancestral Dragon King and the rest had already reached here, and they walked past the 8 dragons to come to the side of the coffin. Ancestral Dragon King's divine might burst forth, as he tried to open the floating coffin. However, the floating coffin was extremely heavy, and it was covered with a huge number of seals. Even a great god on the numinous sky realm like him wasn't able to open it. The feathered forest guards are one of the 2 guards among the 10 guards of celestial heavens. The left and right feathered forest, the left and right dragon marshal, the left and right divine marshal, the left and right divine stratagem, and the left and right divine awe. Among them, the feathered forest guards were personally controlled by Celestial Emperor. What is the feathered forest? The feathered wings of the empire, as flourishing as a forest. That is the feathered forest. Prince Qiuming said, "Since the feathered forest guards are the army of Celestial Emperor, the ones chosen are naturally the strongest existences in the world. Demon Dragon, how could the seals placed by them be opened up by someone like you?" Ancestral Dragon's face flushed and he sneered, saying, "Even if I can't open it, can you?" Prince Qiuming's clothes fluttered in the wind as he took a wide stride forward. He said with a smile, "The feathered forest guards are the army of my celestial heavens, from generation to generation. I've also entered the feathered forest guards to seek knowledge, so even though my cultivation is inferior to yours, opening up the seals of the Dragon Han era isn't difficult for me." His hands moved up, and his vital qi transformed into all kinds of runes. The runes marked themselves on the coffin one after another, and it was truly remarkable and exquisite. Everyone saw this and felt apprehensive. The paths, skills, and divine arts of the celestial heavens are truly immeasurable. Qin Mu's heart also sank. Prince Jiuming's attainments were extremely high, and his abilities were extraordinarily strong. The celestial heavens have been collecting all kinds of Emperor's throne techniques, and the elites they have groomed are indeed extraordinary. After a moment, beads of sweat rolled down Prince Jiuming's forehead, and he started to frown. He suddenly moved back and shook his head. Strange, it's not just the seals of the feathered forest guards on this. There are also seals I have not yet learned. Feng Qiuyan sneered and said, "Bumpkin prince of the upper bound who only knows how to brag, what a joke. Let me do it." She placed down the Emperor's coffin, and pulled out the Mother Earth primordial sword. The wooden sword flashed and stabbed at the coffin of Celestial Empress, as she tried to break the seal by force. Even though she was the maid of Mother Earth, she was also the chief of the Phoenix race, a great expert on the numinous sky realm. She had extremely strong abilities, and with the Mother Earth primordial sword, it shouldn't be difficult for her to break the seal. However, even after Feng Qiuyan had stabbed dozens of times, light flowed around the coffin, and all kinds of seals appeared. They actually blocked her power and the power of the Mother Earth primordial sword. The seal around the coffin was a circular stellar system formed by countless kinds of divine arts. They absorbed the power of the Mother Earth primordial sword. Feng Qiuyan frowned, and she put the sword back into her sleeves. She returned to the side of the Emperor's coffin. Prince Jiuming said with a smile, "Even though Mother Earth is strong, her foundation is still far inferior to the celestial heavens. Who else wants to try?" Qin Mu had a strange expression. It was fine if it was the other seals, as he didn't recognize many of them. However, when these seals formed together, it was the seal of Founding Master. He had seen Founding Master's galaxy seal more than once, and he had also solved them more than once. Beside the parameter arc, in the valley where the old dragon was suppressed, on the god execution stage of Crimson Light Abnormal Star, he had solved them before. Suddenly, he felt a pair of eyes on his body, and he looked over to see Zhehuali. Qin Mu gave him a slight smile. When he had solved the galaxy divine art on god execution stage, Zhehuali and Qijui were right beside him, and they even got tricked by him. It was obvious that Zhehuali still remembered this. Only Cult Master Qin can solve these seals. Zhehuali suddenly spoke out. Why doesn't Cult Master Qin give it a try? Pairs of eyes landed on Qin Mu's body, and Qin Mu laughed loudly. He let go of Dragon Rearing Sovereign's horn, and let his head smashed onto the ground. His head bounced several times, but he was still too limp to get up. Qin Mu walked to the side of Celestial Empress' coffin. He carefully examined the seal on it and suddenly burst out into laughter. This seal has been solved by someone before, so it isn't too difficult to solve it again. Solved by someone before. Everyone was astonished, and before they could come back to their senses, Qin Mu moved quickly around the coffin and executed all kinds of mudra skills. Instantly, the stellar system around the coffin moved, and the stars were being solved continuously. The stars formed by all kinds of divine arts retreated to the back. Not long later, all of the stars had moved back, and they transformed into runes to mark the coffin, forming a brilliant image of a galaxy. Catcher. Celestial Empress coffin gave off a light sound. Qin Mu moved back to village chief's side. I'm lucky to have met everyone's expectations. The lid of the coffin slowly floated upwards and hung above the coffin. In the coffin, multicolored sunlight rose, and the sound of Tao lingered on. It was as though a beautiful woman was singing with all kinds of unending temperament. That kind of Tao voice was from the rhythm of the great Tao, which caused people to be entranced and unable to pull themselves out. Nobody cared why Qin Mu was able to open the seal. They hurriedly rushed forward and looked into the coffin. Crimson Light, Son of God, suddenly cried out, "What a beautiful woman!" Everyone else's throat was parched as they blushed when they saw the woman in the coffin. They were speechless. Suddenly, a half-god roared and ripped apart his shirt as he tried to jump into the coffin. To be able to be buried with such a beauty in the same coffin, I have not lived my life for naught. Kai Luo Wushuang slashed down with his knife and killed the half-god. Whoever dares to insult the corpse of Celestial Empress shall end up like that fool. Ancestral Dragon King, get your subordinates to settle down. The knife in his hand was also trembling slightly. It was obvious he was also astonished by the beauty of the woman in the coffin, and that his Dao heart was slightly wavering. Celestial Empress. Ancestral Dragon King's laryngeal prominence moved up and down, and his gaze fell on the coffin. He asked with a hoarse voice, "There are two women in the coffin, which one is Celestial Empress?" Qin Mu and Village Chief were stunned. Two women in the coffin. Village Chief asked with a low voice, "Mua, when you opened the coffin, did you look inside?" Qin Mu shook his head and said softly, "Village Chief wanted me to stay low-key, so I immediately moved back after I opened the coffin, so that I didn't become everyone's target. As for what's in the coffin, I'm not too clear." "How are there two corpses in the coffin?" Both of them looked at each other in dismay. Village Chief hesitated for a moment. "Why don't we go up and take a look as well?" Qin Mu nodded his head repeatedly, as he couldn't suppress his curiosity. Village Chief also couldn't suppress his curiosity. He raised his hand to grab Dragon Rearing Sovereign's horn, and dragged him forward as well. When they arrived at the side of the coffin, Village Chief tiptoed to look in the coffin. The multicolored sunlight lit everybody's faces up, and two women could be seen lying silently inside the coffin. "How pretty, even a little prettier than Granny Sai," praised Village Chief. Qin Mu's hands grabbed onto the sides of the coffin, and he popped his head over to look. There were indeed two remarkably beautiful women inside the coffin. However, one of them was perfect and flawless, while the other was slightly less pretty. Even when he was used to Granny Sai's beauty, he still could feel his heart stirring. That woman placed both of her hands in front of her chest as though she was asleep. "How pretty!" Qin Mu's heart stirred slightly, and he took off the willow leaf on the heart of his brows, allowing Heaven Duke, Earth Count, and the rest to see the sight in the coffin. "Heaven Duke, come look at this woman." Heaven Duke's astonished voice rang out in his mind. "Zhu Wuchen. Why is she dead?" The woman in the coffin is indeed Zhu Wuchen. Qin Mu's heart stirred, and his consciousness asked Heaven Duke, "Is the other woman in the coffin Celestial Empress?" His gaze landed on the body of the other woman, and the body of the other woman seemed to be formed completely naturally. She was born by the great Tao of heaven and earth, so even though she wasn't as beautiful as Zhu Wuchen, she was still a rare beauty. She had the bearing of a motherly model of the world, and the clothes on her body were tailored with threads refined from the most precious divine metal. She wore a phoenix crown on her head, and on the heart of her brows was a spot of cinnabar. She had a powdered face and red lips. The injuries on her body were rather severe, but to Qin Mu, her wounds weren't considered lethal. There was still a way to treat her. However, there were no such conditions in the past, so the wounds of this woman were enough to take her life. The Tao of healing didn't belong to the great Tao of heaven and earth after all. It was a great Tao that was created by the life forms after the beginning, and in the past, the Tao of healing had merely just taken off, so it wasn't enough to treat injuries like this. And the great Tao of creation was also a great Tao created by the life forms. The great Tao of creation from that era wasn't enough to help Celestial Emperor change her fate. It is Celestial Empress. Heaven Duke borrowed his eye to examine the two female corpses in the coffin and sighed. Celestial Empress is actually dead. This woman is sacred and extraordinary, never would I have expected her to become a corpse as well. I always thought that among the leaders of the ancient gods, goddess of heavenly yin was the first to die. Never would I have expected it to be her. So who exactly is the Celestial Empress in the celestial heavens? Could it be Heaven Duke can determine she's Celestial Empress? Qin Mu suddenly asked, Heaven Duke, I've heard that Celestial Empress and her sister look the same, maybe it's her sister that's in the coffin. It's not that woman. Even though they are twin sisters, there are still differences. Heaven Duke said patiently, the older sister is clear as ice and clean as jade, having a bearing that is sacred and can't be violated, thus she was Celestial Empress. On the other hand, the younger sister is much more active and bizarre. The most obvious difference between both of them is the mark on the heart of their brows. The older sister has a red mark, which is extremely feminine and supple, while the younger sister has a black mark, which is extremely demonic. Qin Mu examined that spot of cinnabar on Celestial Empress corpse and realized it wasn't dotted with cinnabar. Looking at it in detail, there seemed to be boundless vein lines that were hidden inside, making it extremely profound and marvelous. Heaven Duke sighed. Both sisters fighting each other to the death for Celestial Emperor, is it worth the trouble? However, why is Zhu Wuchen dead as well? This woman lured Celestial Emperor to reincarnate and assaulted him. She's truly ruthless, and her methods are extraordinary. Why would her corpse be here? Who killed her and placed her here? Qin Mu was at a loss from his questions. What Heaven Duke was asking was also what he wanted to ask, but it was obvious that Heaven Duke didn't know the answer, which was why he was asking him. Don't cover your eye. Heaven Duke saw Qin Mu grabbing the willow leaf, and he hurriedly said, This is interesting, let us have a look as well. Qin Mu could only put away the willow leaf, as he heard Crimson Emperor's voice sounding out. This is Zhu Wuchen. Truly a beauty. What a pity. If I were still alive, you would die miserably. Earth Count's voice rang out, and he said, even Heaven Duke and Celestial Emperor couldn't resist the temptation. If Celestial Emperor didn't send himself to death, Heaven Duke would definitely have reincarnated and flirted with this woman, sending himself to death. Old Buddha, has your mortal heart started stirring? Brahma Buddha said, beauty will still turn into a skeleton. To me, it's nothing more than that. The crux is that a god won't die from old age, so there is only beauty and no skeleton. Heaven Duke said, Old Buddha, your Dharma still has flaws, be careful of being at a disadvantage. Great Sun Sovereign, what do you know about this woman? Great Sun Sovereign grumbled, what can I know? Everything that I know has already been dug out by you guys. Besides, Zhu Wuchen died after me, and I wouldn't have dared to have any thoughts about her. Truly a beauty. To be able to share the same room with such a person. Strange, there's no obvious wound on her body. Crimson Light, Son of God, discovered something and suddenly spoke. Everyone hurriedly examined her in detail, and the Zhu Wuchen in the coffin indeed had no wound. She laid there quietly, and it was as if she was asleep. Her fair cheeks had some rosy color, but she wasn't breathing. Could someone have used a Yudu spell to seize her soul by force? Everyone stood in front of the coffin, and couldn't bear to disperse. They had completely forgotten that their goal was to investigate the real and fake Celestial Empress and not the woman in the coffin. Feng Chuyan suddenly sneered and said, men are all no good. How dare you call yourselves heroes? It's just a woman and even a corpse, yet you stinky men are head over heels for her, how laughable. Qin Mu said in delight, Sister Chuyan, I'm not head over heels for her, I'm still pretty sober. Village Chief, you are too, am I right? Village Chief's face blushed slightly, and he chuckled. I'm long used to granny-size beauty, so I'm naturally in control. Feng Qian snorted and looked at Prince Chiu Ming. Bumpkin Prince of the Upper Bound, we are here to see if this is Celestial Empress coffin, and if it's really her that's inside. Now that you have taken a look, do you have an answer? Prince Chiu Ming pulled back his gaze, and he said solemnly, it's indeed Celestial Empress that is in the coffin. Everyone was astonished, and that included Luo Wushuang. Feng Qian said, so who is the Celestial Empress in the celestial heavens? Prince Chiu Ming shook his head and said, I don't know. I suddenly don't want to know. The more you know, the faster you will die. I don't want to die. I just want to leave this ghost ship. Everyone can leave now. The gaze of every man was placed on Zhu Wuchen, who was in the coffin. No one moved. The ghost ship was no longer important. All of them wanted to stay here to be with this woman in the coffin. Village chief sighed and pulled back his gaze. He pulled Qin Mu's hand and slowly moved back. We aren't interested in the ghost ship, nor are we interested in the woman in the coffin. We will make a move first. He kicked Dragon Rearing Sovereign, and Dragon Rearing Sovereign barely managed to stand up. He moved out with them. Right at this moment, light flashed from somewhere, and everyone saw white light in front of their eyes. They couldn't see anything. Qin Mu and village chief's hearts squeezed. This ghost ship is going to reset time and space again. Waves of dragon roars came from the hall, and terrifying auras burst forth. Qin Mu immediately sensed the 8 stone dragons guarding the coffin starting to revive, so he felt a chill down his back. He hurriedly ran out of the hall. Dragon roars reverberated in the hall, and terrifying pulses spread out. There was the light of knives, the shadow of swords, and even the impact of the Emperor's oar. Even though the hall was very huge, it also couldn't take the impact of the divine arts from so many experts. Furthermore, there was even an Emperor's corpse here, as well as divine weapons on Emperor's throne realm. Quickly leave this place, it's going to reset, the tiny human in the lantern cried out flusteredly. Village chief immediately pulled out his sword, and the sword light flashed. In terms of sword skills, Qin Mu had already surpassed him, but in terms of sword Dao, he was still the #1 man in Eternal Peace. Even Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was far inferior. On the Divine Bridge realm, he had already founded the 9 forms of sword picture. One move of sword Dao was equivalent to 1 heaven, so at that time, he was already a great expert on the 9 heavens of sword Dao. Entering the Dao was difficult no matter which method was used. However, in order to advance another step, it was more than difficult. Even an existence like Heavenly Teacher Z, she had only reached 13 heavens in Sword Dao. However, Heavenly Teacher Z, she was on the numinous sky realm, and the 13 heavens of Sword Dao was her limit. That was the Sword Dao she had opened up on the numinous sky realm. Village Chief was different. He was trapped on the Divine Bridge realm back then, and couldn't find a technique that could surpass the Divine Bridge realm, so he couldn't cultivate to an even higher realm. He had relied completely on his talent and hard work to create the 9 forms of sword picture. The 9 forms of sword picture corresponded to the realm of a true god. This also meant that on the Divine Bridge realm, the sword Dao he comprehended had already reached the realm of a true god. Afterward, when Qin Mu spread out techniques like the secrets of Magpie Bridge to patch the Divine Bridge, using between life and death to connect to Fengdu, and using mutual shift bridge to connect to Supreme Emperor Heaven, more and more god techniques and devil techniques emerged. Even techniques on Emperor's throne realm were spread out, and village chiefs' horizons rose drastically. When Qin Mu had been traveling around, during this period of time, village chief hadn't been slacking off. He had memorized the techniques of the Sword Dao in the Jade Brightness Palace by heart, and his Sword Dao had another astonishing breakthrough. With a sword in hand, village chief broke through all kinds of divine arts and brought Qin Mu and dragon-rearing sovereign to break out. There was also light in front, so he couldn't see anything. He could only rely on his own feelings to advance forward, and suddenly, his sword touched a divine knife and gave off a loud clank. That divine knife flowed swiftly like mercury, and there were no holes that it couldn't pass through. Village chief executed his sword skill to block the divine knife, and he said solemnly, "Divine knife Luo. Eternal peace sword god." The divine knife flowed swiftly. The knife Dao clashed violently with the sword Dao, and village chief was stunned when he swung his sword to block. The power from the knife wasn't strong, and it wasn't much different from his magic power. Divine knife Luo is suppressing his realm to fight with me. He wants to see my sword Dao. Suddenly, his knife light was pulled back, and Luo Wushuang left into the distance. In the light, a divine dragon suddenly passed through the knife light and sword shadow, throwing village chief and Qin Mu into midair. It wasn't known if it was a divine dragon from Dragon Count country, or if it was ancestral dragon king. Even more people rushed out from the hall, and a huge bang rang out as the hall collapsed. Blazing flames burst out in the light, and it was Feng Qiuyan who had opened up the emperor's coffin. The emperor's corpse jumped out and roared furiously, shattering the entire hall. "Feng Qiuyan, you are crazy." Crimson light, son of God, transformed into a beam of light to pass by the side of Qin Mu and the rest. Right at this moment, the light suddenly faded away, and they regained their sight. Village chief protected Qin Mu and dragon-rearing sovereign, while he scattered sword light from his hands to slice all kinds of divine arts. He landed gently on the ground and gave a grunt. Blood leaked out from the corner of his mouth. Qin Mu immediately said, "Village chief, you are injured." "I'm fine." Village chief said faintly, "I just got rubbed against by the divine dragon, so I still won't die." Luo Wushuang's knife Dao is indeed very powerful. His knife Dao has already reached 13 heavens. However, seeing how I've just entered the Dao, my sword Dao is not inferior. Qin Mu quickly executed creation divine arts to treat his injuries. Dragon-rearing sovereign said with a muddled head, "My lord, wasn't the hall earlier destroyed?" Qin Mu was stunned and turned back to take a look. He saw the hall standing upright there properly, and it hadn't collapsed. It looked the same as it did, and there was no place that had been damaged. The 8 dragons were still coiled around in the hall, and protecting the coffin of Celestial Empress. Beside the coffin was another coffin, and it was the Emperor's stone coffin that Feng Qiuyan had brought over. The stone coffin was half submerged in the ground, and the other half was outside. That Emperor's corpse was actually fused with the ground and the stone coffin. The green face of the zombie was currently stuck on the lid of the coffin, and his grey-white eyes were rolling around. Numerous half-gods that were brought here by ancestral Dragon King had half of their bodies stuck to the wall. Some grew on pillars and revealed their butts outside, while some were sunk into the ground as though faces were growing on the ground. They were still alive. However, when the light had burst forth earlier, it was as if they were reconstructed. However, the reconstruction seemed to be wrong, and caused them to be fused as one with this hall. Part 319 and 320 end here. Thank you for watching.